Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Something happened that I find rather hilarious. On national television, CNBC, there was a four-person panel including Kim Jong-Gensler as well as Jim Cramer. And Jim Cramer actually got a little bit mad at Gary Gensler and called him out for losing the SEC v. Ripple case. I'll tell you exactly what happened. It makes me laugh. It puts a smile on my face because Gary Gensler, I mean, you think back in just a couple years ago, endlessly bragging about how the SEC, they've only won crypto cases. They never lose. How many defeats have they had now? Just a little bit more time because they've so far overreached. And the judges keep on bitch smacking them back down. It's fun to watch. Those parts are always fun to watch. You can see that there are certain cases that do not look like there's a good chance that the SEC is going to win. I'm skeptical of them winning in this Coinbase lawsuit ultimately, for example. But obviously lost everything that mattered in the Ripple case. There was the Deboox case just thrown out. There was the Grayscale lawsuit. You love to see it. And in fact, I've got some more defeats for the SEC to highlight in this video, which you're going to enjoy. It's just going to be so tasty. You're going to love it. And then there's this headline from the Daily Hodl. Brad Garlinghouse says crypto regulatory progress more likely to happen after 2024 elections. And so he's been in a couple of interviews recently. The one that I'm going to talk about is where he was on CNBC. But anyway, before going further, I do want to be clear. I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so let's get into the main event here. Here's a headline from the Daily Hodl. Gary Gensler says crypto exchanges are doing what the New York Stock Exchange would never be allowed to do. The chair of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission says that crypto exchanges are doing what the New York Stock Exchange would never be allowed to do. In a new interview on CNBC's Squawk Box, SEC Chair Gary Gensler says that crypto exchange platforms are not giving investors the proper disclosures required by the law and could be trading against consumers. Now, folks, I'm going to share with you the exact quote, but after I read the exact quote, you're going to be left asking the same thing. And I was like, what is he actually talking about? He's just saying things. He's saying things. What are the accusations that are specific, and is this rampant from every single exchange is engaged? Like, what are you even talking about? He's just saying stuff that sounds bad on national television because he's anti-crypto. But so anyway, here's the quote from SEC Supreme Leader and Dictator Kim Jong-Gensler. Right now, without prejudging anyone, these tokens have not given you the disclosures that you not only need to make your investment decisions, but also that are required by the law. So I'll pause to say there, obviously, you know what he's getting at. The coins themselves are the security, so there have to be these disclosures. Now, of course, we know that anything, unless it's listed in the actual definition of what a security is, and crypto and digital assets, certainly not, unless it's something that's specifically listed, or I meant to say investment contract, unless something is specifically listed as a security or as a part of the definition of investment contract, like stocks would be, then yeah. But again, this certainly is not here. So it's never, of course, the asset itself that is a security if it's not included in that definition. So what is he actually talking about here? It's the same crap that they unsuccessfully tried in the SEC v. Ripple case. He's wording it in a slightly different way on national television. Still, to this day, this is astonishing. It's the losing tactic. It doesn't work because these coins don't pass the Howey test. Anyway, then Kim Jong-Gensler said, it's a basic concept in our securities markets, and what President Roosevelt did is he created this commission to oversee that you, the investors, get disclosure, and in the crypto markets, they aren't giving you that disclosure. And secondly, that exchanges, like the floor of the New York Stock Exchanges, get properly regulated to protect against fraud and manipulation, and they don't trade against you. And these crypto exchanges are doing things we would never allow the New York Stock Exchange to do. Our laws don't allow you to trade against your customers, end quote. So what in the ever-loving hell is he talking about? And you know, this obviously on top of that just not making sense, and there's no specificity there. He's just making these broad claims, trading against the customer. Well, it rings hollow on top of that because the SEC approved the Coinbase IPO a couple years back, didn't they? And then they go and sue them for all this nonsense. It's so disingenuous. No one's falling for this. That's why the judge is calling them out in this case. Exactly for that. So then, as far as the Ripple lawsuit, and again, this just made me laugh here. So, shout out and credit to at BankXRP on social media platform X. He shared a couple clips, and here you can see. So here's the panel. That's Jim Cramer right here, and so Jim Cramer. He says, and this is a quote. Actually, I went to the trouble of transcribing this because there's not many words to transcribe. It's a very short interaction here, but he got clearly exasperated here by Gary Gensler. So Cramer starts talking and he says, SEC versus Ripple Labs, and then after he says that, he spits that out. Then Gensler cuts off Cramer to avoid that topic. I wonder why. And then he directed his attention to another guy on the panel. So then Gary Gensler says, and this is a quote, Dave, what do you want to ask? End quote. This offended Jim Cramer. This hilariously offended Jim Cramer. So he gets all exasperated. He's frustrated. And so then Cramer says in his exasperation, oh, thanks. You lost that one. Thanks. And it sounded pretty much like that, folks. That's an exact quote. He said, oh, thanks. You lost that one. I just love seeing Gensler get called out to that degree in that style on national television. It's just fantastic. You'll love to see it. But look, if I were Kim Jong Gensler, I wouldn't want to talk about that either. But that was way too obvious a dodge. And then Jim Cramer, being Jim Cramer, got offended on national television, live television. But of course he lost this. The SEC v. Ripple case, like. It's like John Deaton said. I mean, he said this years ago. It's like, as somebody who wasn't practicing in securities laws and just looking from the outside in, it was, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he basically said, like, to him, it probably looked way more obvious that this was a losing case for the SEC, whereas some of the insiders, well, there is an echo chamber there as well, but I think they're just kind of used to seeing, people, operators in the world of crypto lose against the SEC, this and that, and they thought it would be too much of an uphill battle. Are the judges sufficiently going to understand crypto? But from John Deaton's perspective, and he ended up being proven right, of course, it's just like, well, if you just look at the letter of the law, the SEC factually is incorrect. They're just wrong. And so things did go the way that we wanted to. And by the way, I'll mention this, and this won't be surprising, I don't think, to pretty much anybody listening, but as you guys well know to this point, the ETH ETFs, SEC let the world know, yes, they're going to be happening, but it looks like they're slow rolling this. And so Fox Business journalist Eleanor Terrett, she shared this post on X, and it's referencing part of what he said in this very same interview with Jim Cramer. And so Eleanor Terrett said, new. SEC Chairman Gary Gensler says the next step in the ETH ETF approvals, quote, will take some time, end quote, possibly indicating a potential slow walk of the S1 approval process. And so there you go. It's going to happen, but they're going to make everyone's life as hellish as possible in the meantime and to drag this thing out because they don't actually want to do it. The SEC is throwing a tantrum. They're just kicking and screaming, but they feel like they have to do it or they wouldn't be doing this. Is what it is. But they're not doing it in a friendly manner, let's say. Let's talk about more defeats of the SEC. Here's the latest defeat, and this is going to sound very familiar to you. Check this out. This is from attorney Jake Chervinsky, well known in the world of crypto, and he said, the Fifth Circuit just vacated the SEC's private funds rule, holding that the SEC exceeded its statutory authority to regulate private fund advisors. The administrative state is out of control, and the federal judiciary is reining it in. Love to see it. Well, isn't that something? The SEC exceeded its statutory authority? You mean it did stuff that it's not, that Congress didn't give it the power to do, which we've been bitching about in the world of crypto for literally years? And this is what's being found? No way. Color me surprised. So that was reposted by attorney James Murphy, aka Meta Lawman, on social media platform X, and he said, another loss for the Gary Gensler regime as the Fifth Circuit finds the SEC exceeded the authority granted to it by Congress. Sound familiar? Congress needs to withhold funding of the SEC until such time as it has demonstrated that it can be trusted to follow the law. Simple. Okay, that is spot on. Remember Judge Sarah Netburn in the SEC v. Ripple case saying it was either exactly this or something very close, that the SEC lacks a faithful allegiance to the law. And these are not one-off comments, and you don't normally see a magistrate judge railing on a government agency like that. Like this is far outside the norm. Like, we're used to it because we keep seeing this happen. This is far outside the norm. It's completely unacceptable. But that's what this government agency, that's how they're behaving. Now, so that's why, yes, it absolutely is nice to see them getting reined in. Absolutely. And take a look at this. So you guys, you may recall that there's been a bit of an exodus in terms of employment at the SEC, because people don't really like working under Kim Jong-Gensler. And so I've reported on those stories as they popped up. They've been, over the last, I don't know, year, maybe even a little bit longer than that, shared with some amount of regularity on mainstream media, right? Well, there are consequences to a lot of people quitting. In fact, take a look at this from CoinDesk. SEC to shutter office behind failed Deboox crypto lawsuit. So they're closing this office, and you may recall very recently the Deboox case was thrown out by the judge. They chucked that bitch on out of there because it was frivolous and nonsense. Anyway, piece reads as follows. The Securities and Exchange Commission Salt Lake City office, notorious in the crypto world for its failed fraud lawsuit against Deboox, will shut down after seeing significant attrition, and that's a quote, among its staff, some of whom were pushed out over the case. SEC lawyers Michael Welsh and Joseph Watkins resigned in April after a federal judge sanctioned them for committing a, quote, gross abuse of power, end quote, in seeking to freeze the assets of Utah-based crypto company Deboox on misleading grounds. Just last week, the judge dismissed that case and ordered the SEC to pay Deboox $1.8 million in legal fees. Yeah, so case thrown out, $1.8 million in legal fees, which means that the taxpayer's footing that bill. Hooray. But yet another example. This SEC is not protecting investors, and that's not what they're trying to do. They're not trying to protect investors. And it shows. They're doing things that harm investors. There's this piece from the Daily Huddle. Brad Garlinghouse says crypto regulatory progress more likely to happen after 2024. Ripple Chief Executive Brad Garlinghouse is a little bit skeptical, and that's quote, that landmark crypto legislation will be passed in the U.S. before the presidential election in November. In a new interview with CNBC, Garlinghouse acknowledges that the Biden administration has been softening its rhetoric against crypto, but he still thinks real regulatory developments probably won't happen until 2025. Yeah, I'll say, and that is true, and that has been interesting. Certainly the Biden administration has been talking a lot more softly and less destructively against crypto. That's true. But where's the action? We haven't seen any actual action that would lead us to believe that there's actually anything behind it. And the reason that they're even talking this way is because they realize that the polls are very close. This is probably going to be a very close election. And there is no anti-crypto voter bloc. It doesn't exist. They're not catering to any voter bloc there by going against crypto, but there is a pro-crypto bloc. So they're just forsaking all of the crypto holders. Tens of millions of Americans that have bought crypto, just like, no, but we're just gonna push policy not in favor of you. Okay, that's an actual voter bloc, and things are close. So they've changed their tune. We haven't seen any actions that are actually good here. Maybe we will. As far as I'm concerned, it's too little, too late, though, and I have a hard time trusting that. But here's a quote from Brad Garlinghouse. As we all have seen, the wheels of legislative progress move slowly and carefully. I'm thrilled by the progress that we've made, even in the last 3 weeks. And I think it may have been the most important 2 or 3 weeks in the U.S. crypto evolution ever, but I still think getting the legislation passed may require waiting until after the election, maybe before the end of the year, more likely the first half of next year, end quote. Yeah, and so that's if it even happens. Until then, you're just paying lip service so far as I'm concerned. I want to see something actually happen here. And I'm not optimistic that this is in any way genuine. It's just very obvious pandering. Because it just flipped on a dime. I mean, it was just like you wake up one day and then the tune just changed. Out of nowhere. After years of consistent messaging against crypto. They just changed one day. Little disingenuous, don't you think? I sure as hell do. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say, all right? That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.